you actually say something. So you will, you know, like not be seen anyways. It is always nice for me to be able to see your face. I like how Aiden's outside. That's cool. I love how so many of you are. That's nice. I wish I was outside right now. We actually talked about this, so we're going to skip that. We actually talked about this, so we're going to skip that. We already, like, literally, we don't need that. So, the decline of the Byzantine Empire. Oh, poor Emmy, she was writing and then had to erase. Is that what happened? No. Okay. So, things aren't going to go great. So, Emperor Justinian was the height of the Byzantine Empire. However, that happened, you know, in the 500s. And the Byzantine Empire is going to last to 1054. So, we're going to know we're going to have a long decline. And we're going to have plague first. And tons of people are going to die. And they called it the Plague of Justinian, which is never a good thing when someone names a plague after you. Okay, folks? So don't be flattered. Don't think, oh, this is so wonderful. They named it after me. The Jacob Plague. No, they're not being nice to you if they call it the Jacob Plague or the Mede Plague. You don't want that, gentlemen. And tons of people die. And they actually blame the plague. They say, it's because you married Theodora, that actress. I know, crazy, right? And then also, we have the empire being attacked all the time. Yes, Aiden, sir. I can't hear you, Aiden. Like, I see you speaking, but I can't read your lips. So maybe type it in the chat, broski. Sorry. And basically, it's one of those things that over time, they lost more and more and more land because they're constantly attacked. Hopefully, Aiden's not about to tell us, hey, I've got a plague named after me. It's pretty cool. I miss you guys. So, this is the empire under Justinian. It's big, right? You got all the purple, all the orange. It's amazing. So big. So proud of Belisarius, his general, who did almost all that work and then still got thrown in prison because Theodore said he was going to commit treason. Yeah, well, this is not the same as the bubonic plague, but we will talk about that when we get to Europe at the end of the day. This is approximately 900 years before the bubonic plague. And this is the Byzantine Empire near the end, where we see this little itty bitty bit of purple. So we go from wabam to puny. So puny. And guess what? It's going to shrink even smaller than that, where they won't control Greece. They aren't going to control Asia Minor. They're just going to have that little itty bitty dot and then Crimea right over there. And basically, yeah, because what's going to happen is new empires are going to come in and conquer. You could cutting out. Since your camera is looking like stop motion, and yeah, I think it's you. All right, so then another thing that's going to have the Byzantines start declining is we have the Crusades. Now, we're going to talk about the Crusades at the end of the year. And basically, what happens is it's extremely complicated, extremely crazy. But the Crusades were a series of wars against Christians versus Muslims to control the Holy Land. The Fourth Crusade was a complete disaster. Basically, the Crusaders said, hey, we want to go attack Egypt. And the Byzantines said, well, you need money to go on our boats. And then they said, well, we don't have any money. So then the Byzantines said, well, what if you guys go and beat up these guys for us? And then we'll count that as payment. So the Crusaders went, beat up those guys for them. And then there was a new Byzantine emperor at the time. And he said, yeah, I don't want to pay you guys. And because they were already in the city, they stole everything inside of the city. And that was the Fourth Crusade. The city never recovers from it. Never, ever. It's like a shell of its former self for the final 200 years that it exists. Just because, you know, they didn't breach the walls. They were already inside of the walls. So they just opened the gates and they stole everything they wanted to. It was a real bummer for Byzantium. And we're going to see Russians attacking from the north. Our Islamic caliphate, such as the Abbasid Caliphate, is going to be attacking them, and the Umayyads. They're going to be attacking them from the south, the east, the west, all over, taking land. And so the Byzantine Empire just shrinks. And we know the official end, of course, is in 1453, where we have the Ottoman Turks blowing down the walls. And that is the story, the crux, the piece de resistance that we are going to talk about today. I'm so proud of my daughter today. Speaking of using French words, we were making pancakes, bacon, sausage, and She loves making pancakes with her daddy. And we put some apple butter in the pancake mix. And she goes, oh, that's going to be the je ne sais quoi, which means that certain something. And it was just very proud to hear my 4-year-old speaking French to me. Oh. So yeah, whenever you make something special and you add a secret ingredient, that is your je ne sais quoi, folks. Je ne sais quoi. Enough French. We got to keep going because we've got a story. Now, the next couple slides are going to have 12 billion words on them. I do not want you to write all 12 billion words, okay? I don't want Simon's hand falling off, even though it appears that Simon isn't actually writing. He's choosing to play with some string or something like that, which hopefully he retains all of this information instead of me having to defenestrate him, because, you know, that would be a bummer. Playing with his headset cord. Wowzers.
I was untangling it.
Excuses. So, you need to know that there's a sultan who wants to prove himself. So, we have Sultan Mehmet I. Now, Mehmet I was like the best sultan ever. He ruled the Ottoman Turks. He was so great. Everybody loved Mehmet I. Now, you're going to see this a couple different ways. Some texts will say Mehmed, like that. Some will be Mehmet with a T. And some will be completely wrong and just say Muhammad. That's going to be part of the problems with Europeans writing about Eastern empires. They just totally botch the names all the time. So Mehmed or Mehmet. Well, Mehmet I was awesome. He was so awesome, he said, I am going to retire and let my son, Mehmet II, be the Sultan, and it's going to be great. But here's the thing. Mehmet II was 19 years old. He was young, he was foolish, and no one believed in him. And so he wound up being a terrible ruler. So bad that his daddy, Mehmet I, winds up going and saying, okay, I'm going to be Sultan again. You take a back seat. You were not ready for this job. Oh my goodness, you did terrible. And so Mehmet I becomes Sultan again, but then because he's old, he dies after a few years. And Mehmet II once again takes over. And Mehmet II this time says, I am not going to be a loser pants. I am going to rock the Casbah and be the best Sultan ever. And he says, I'm going to be the best Sultan ever by conquering the city that's never been conquered. I'm going to conquer Constantinople. And we have to remember, Constantinople had the moats, the walls. It's so tough. How are they possibly going to do this? Well, that's what we're going to talk about now, folks. Now, like I said, you don't have to write this bullet right here about Urban of Transylvania, but basically what happened is there's this dude, Urban of Transylvania, and he liked to build guns. That was his job. He built gigantic guns that he sold it to emperors and kings so that they could go blow up their enemies. And Urban II of Transylvania, yes, Transylvania is a real place, just not where Dracula lives, built a gigantic gun. And he says, hey, Byzantine emperor, which I think he was like Constantine the 11th or 13th, I can't remember. I think he was the 11th. And he says, Constantine, would you like to buy this incredibly large gun that will blow up all of your enemies? And Constantine II says, I would love to buy your incredibly large gun that would blow up all of my enemies, but alas, I only have this much money. Is that enough? And Urban says, no, this is an expensive gun. There's no way I'm going to sell it to you for that little. But now Urban has a problem. Urban has this really gigantic gun that is really good at blowing up enemies, but no person to sell it to. Then he talks to the Ottoman Sultan, Mehmet II. Whoa! And Mehmet II says, I will pay you as much money as you want for that big gun because I have big plans for that big gun. Now, when I say it is 26 feet long, so if any of you remember my classroom, which I know Jacob goes, I cannot remember your classroom because I've never been in it, Mr. Kenny. Most of you, however, can. That's about how like wide my classroom is. Yeah. So from like, you know how I have the chalkboards on each side, the one that had like your homework and all that stuff, and the other wall where I would write down like notes and things on it. That's about as wide as my classroom. And it'd shoot cannonballs that were like over a ton, so over 1,500 pounds. So like if all of us got together on a scale, probably still not that heavy, over a mile long. And so he goes and uses this gun. Now, this gun is so big. Like I said, you don't have to have all these extra bullets right here. You could just talk about how it was a really stinking huge gun. It took 700 people to move this gun, to load this gun, to use it. 700 people. That's wild. Because think about it. If there are over a ton of these cannonballs, all of these people are working together to move it. It is just amazing. But this gun was a monster. You know, I had a terrible leak yesterday, and my plumber was telling me how he goes and collects guns, and he bought an 1870s chain gun, and then showed me a video of having his daughter shoot it, and it was pretty cool. But he also said it was like $40,000, and that's kind of expensive for something to borrow, to like have a collection. Yeah, I know. Emmy's like, whoa! Or maybe she heard something outside, and that's why she looked out the window. Maybe she's like, maybe I'll have freedom away from Mr. Kenny soon. Okay, so yes, I was right. Constantine the 11th. Win, Mr. Kenny. He goes and says, hey, West, I know we don't get along a lot, but could someone help me against the Ottoman Turks because they're about to conquer? And basically, he gets a couple Genoan and Venetian mercenaries to come. Not many at all. And so there's about 10,000 people to defend the city. And almost everyone has actually left the city for the most part. So that population was pretty close to the entire population. Now, Mehmed. And like I said, you're going to see Mehmed's name spelled 30,000 different ways because European sources are the worst. He has 12,000 of his elite soldiers called Janissaries, which are like the cream of the crop, the best of the best, like are equivalent to Navy SEALs, to like Green Berets or the British SAS, the Russian Spetsnaz. It's 12,000 of those dudes. And then 120,000 regular soldiers. So 10,000 versus 132,000, 12,000 of them being the best of the best. All right. Plus, he has a huge navy blockading the city, so nothing can get in and out. And you can really shorten this. You don't have to have all of these details. You know, I'm never going to be like, how many soldiers did Mehmed have? Because that's not important. You need to know, though, that the Byzantines were outnumbered by a ton. And so they're outnumbered. They have this huge army against them. They only have like a couple thousand mercenaries helping them, and then some of the leftover troops. It's going to be wild. All right? So, now, the Janissaries, who are like the best soldiers in there, and you're absolutely right, Jacob, they don't want to do this charge because they're like, if we charge against those walls, we're all going to die. So you can send the soldiers that are not elite to go die. But Mehmed has an even better idea. He starts going and bombarding the walls. For 2 to 4 weeks, he has all of his hundreds of cannons, including that one gigantic one, bombarding these walls. And that big giant one was the Ottoman bombard. And they are going to go hit the walls, hit the city all over, driving the people mad, making it so the defenders can't get sleep, putting hold. But the thing is, the walls are so thick, it doesn't ever actually create a whole big, enough for people to go in until he gets the idea and says, what if we have all of the cannons aim at the same spot? And so they bombard the same spot and make a giant breach in the walls. Now, our Venetian and Genoese mercenaries, they're there fighting, and they're actually doing great. It's amazing that these guys were able to be holding off. The Genoese in particular, they had these giant shields that we'll see later on when we study Europe that they had put in front of them, and they were crossbowmen. And they're going and shooting the crossbows at the attacking Ottoman forces, and it seems like they might be able to hold them off because it's still a narrow area that all these soldiers are getting through, and because it's narrow, the small numbers are being successful. But then they see the Italian general leading them. He gets wounded, and being mortally wounded means he's going to die from the wound, and then they just run. And then it's all a huge collapse. There's a giant charge then going through. And Constantine the 11th, he goes to the gates of the city where the breach is made. He lifts up his sword with his last remaining soldiers, and he leads the charge himself into the Ottoman army. Now, legend has it that Constantine the 11th is not stabbed or sliced or shot or anything like that. That Constantine the 11th is actually trampled by the massive forces of the Ottomans. And not that he's trampled and then his body is just there, that he's trampled so much that his body actually seeps into the stones and he becomes flatter than a pancake, one with the entryway, and that one day Constantine the 11th would rise again to retake the city in the name of Christendom. Well, that has not happened. That happened, almost 500 years ago, and I'm not holding my breath on that one. But basically, was they've never found his body because, war is horrible. The Hagia Sophia is turned into a mosque, and the city, eventually becomes known as Istanbul. Fun fact: they never actually officially changed the name of Constantinople. Istanbul means the city. And so literally they just called it the city because it was so big, so awesome, going to the city, Istanbul. And then it just became known as Istanbul, the city. But technically, it's still Constantinople. Great, right? Here we see Mehmet II going into the city and going and, right at the Hagia Sophia, and they're begging for mercy. It's a pretty gruesome, horrible thing in history. But yeah, that is our note for the day. So I'm going to stop recording my cherubs. Thank you so much.